Good day to you, Guyana, and welcome to Facing the Nation. I am Malika Ramsey. Thank you very much for joining us again this week. This week, once again, the opposition leader is not with us. He is currently out and about looking after business as it relates to the office of the leader of the opposition. I can tell you exactly what it is. Today, he's currently on his way to Washington, D.C., where he has been invited to speak on Guyana's independence. Of course, you know, we don't only call him the opposition leader here, but we also call him APNU's historian. So he's there to give them some information about Guyana. But of course, as always, there are always persons who fill in for him when he's not here, persons who are quite capable of doing that. And today, those persons are going to be talking to you about parliamentary democracy and governance. As you know, a Partnership for National Unity continues to push for the PPPC government to come up with better ways and means of governing our country, because the opposition, the APNU, the partnership, is not at all satisfied. On the panel with me, I begin with the lone female, Miss Amna Ali. Of course, as you know, Amna Ali is the Assistant General Secretary for the People's National Congress Reform. She's the Shadow Minister for Education, and she is also the Opposition Chief Whip in the National Assembly. Welcome back to you, MP Ali.
Thank you very much.
All right. And Mr. Ronald Bulkin, who is always here, especially in this season in our local, what should have been our local government election season. Mr. Ronald Bulkin is an APNU Member of Parliament, and he's also the Shadow Minister of Local Government. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you, Malika.
All right, great. And the next, the closest popular one, of course, you know, he's very popular too, because he's played a major role regarding the PNC in the Commission of Inquiry for into the Walter Rodney's death. So Mr. Joseph Harmon, who is also the Shadow Minister of Public Works and Attorney at Law. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Malika.
All right. My panel, of course, is ready for you. The first note I want to start off on, and it's really good that I have the Chief Whip, the Opposition Chief Whip here, because, of course, as you know, as Chief Whip, she has a whole lot of work to do in terms of getting her own MPs together and dealing with and working along with the government Chief Whip and working along with government members of Parliament. First off, MP Ali, let's talk parliamentary democracy. I mean, this is not the first time we've had you on and we were talking about governance and parliamentary democracy in Guyana, but thus far, do we have a democratic parliament at present, from what you've seen and the work that you've been doing?
Malika, thank you very much. A democratic parliament. Well, I would say that the parliament that we have right now is supposed to be a democratic parliament. Mm-hmm. The government, however, they try and you know they don't support the idea of a democratic parliament. And I'll tell you why I say this. I say this because, as you know, that on this occasion, this 10th parliament, we have a different dispensation where the government per se, and that's because of our electoral system. Mm-hmm. The government is a minority government, and the majority is formed by the opposition, the joint opposition, the AFC, the APNU. And whatever the APNU and the AFC jointly together says, the government disregards it. So while democratically it is right to go through with things that the APNU and AFC are likely to promote to do, they make it undemocratic because they do not support it. They just believe that, well, it must fall on the wayside. For example, you have bills and so on that were passed in the parliament, and the government, they did not assent to it. The president did not assent to it. And so you have a whole lot of problems emanating from those things. So to say it is that the parliament is supposed to be democratic, but it is undemocratic in a sense, because we are not given the leverage. We are not given the ability to function as a democratic parliament.
Chief Whip Ali, given all that you've said, there are some people out there who've already begun to say, well, then, this one seat majority in the opposition, more so a Partnership for National Unity, may not be making any sense in Parliament. How do you respond to people who would have, lost confidence or say that, look, if government is still doing what they like, what's the point of us voting? What's the point of even having an opposition? How would you respond?
What I would say to the people out there, the electorate, is that they must come out and show their persistence in not only giving us a one-seat majority. That one-seat majority is a reflection of how they are thinking. And so they tried their best, and I congratulate the electorate for that. On this occasion, whenever elections are called, I would thrust that the electorate will give us more of a majority. Well, one-seat majority is good. Whether it's 1, 2, or how many, but we want to strengthen our base. And so I want to call on the electorate out there. The government has no locus standi in terms of determining strength of the parliament, whether it's 1 seat or 10 seats or whatever. The fact remains they are not in the majority. They form a minority. Yes, they have the presidency. Yes, they had they named their ministers, but the combined opposition forms the majority of the legislature.
Okay, all right, great. I would want to talk to you some more about elections and all of that, elections leading up to government and all of that, governance. But before I do that, MP Harman, yes. Chief Whip Ali has just alluded to the fact that, the parliament is not necessarily a democratic one right now. One of the reasons is because, bills are passed, decisions are made in the National Assembly. And I think the largest, most starting one is the fact that you would have, and I even talked to Dr. Rupner Wright about that, you would have voted down monies in the National Assembly and still they're being spent by the finance minister. Legally, what can, if anything at all, what can APNU do? What can us as a people do legally to have that sort of action by the minister corrected and to have him not repeat it?
Well, it's a good question. And I think that the Guyanese public must have become incensed with this kind of serial abuse of the public purse. The manner in which the PPP administration treats with public funds and public assets as if it were their own. And I think the Guyanese public have become very weary of the way in which this government treats with things that are public. But insofar as the National Assembly is concerned, Malika, we have a National Assembly that is meant to be autonomous, independent. And when we speak about Parliament, of course, we're talking about the National Assembly and the executive coming together. And that's one arm of government. The National Assembly itself gets its strength from the representation which members of Parliament make coming from their constituents. So that when we go into the National Assembly, each and every one of us sitting there sit on the strength of at least 5,000 Guyanese persons having voted for them. So that when you are there, you are representing at least 5,000 persons who would have said, yes, this is the person I want to sit there. But then once you get into the National Assembly, the processes in the National Assembly, the independence of the National Assembly, the autonomy of the National Assembly is affected by the manner in which I believe we are currently structured. I believe Dr. Ryan dealt with this matter. Because even though we are meant to be independent, we are still not a full budget agency. We do not fully control our own budget. So we don't have that level of autonomy that says this is the budget for the National Assembly for 2014 and this is how we're going to spend it. So for example, when committees of the National Assembly make recommendations for members of Parliament to travel abroad and things like that, if the government is in a bad mood, they jettison that exercise. If they don't like something that we did in the National Assembly, they withhold funding for these legitimate work which has to be done by members of parliament, particularly opposition members of parliament, when they have to travel. So that even though we have a certain level of independence, the fact that the purse strings of the National Assembly is to some large extent still controlled by the executive, it is to that extent they are exercising and continue to exercise a certain level of power over that independence and autonomy which we ought to have as a National Assembly. So that's one thing. The other thing, of course, has to do with the way our committees are structured and the still sort of control which the executive has exercised for a long period of time over the staffing in the National Assembly. Because remember now, the staff, some of them still come under the Public Service Ministry and so on, so that their employment, their promotion, and all of these things still have something to do with a government minister. So to that extent, there is what I would call, these are elements of independence that we're not fully enjoying in the National Assembly. So the question of the expenditure and the expenditure on funds, on the excesses that are committed by government ministers, the National Assembly processes has something called the Committee of Privileges, and that is where government ministers or members of parliament who behave in a certain manner can be referred to that committee, and that committee is somewhat like the parliamentary court, for want of a better word, that a person is brought before the parliamentary committee and they are treated as if it were a little court there. But I think by and large, the public, the Guyanese public, they have expressed, I believe, it's sort of dissatisfaction with that process, because the sense I'm getting from talking to various communities is that seems to be like an in-house thing, like a little old boys club, and that ministers can actually be violating all sorts of laws. They can be spending money recklessly, and all you get is a pat on the back, say, look, don't do it again, and so on. When in fact, there should be much greater sanctions, and that is something that I fully support. And I think in the National Assembly now we're doing a lot of work, because when you're trying to reverse 20 or 22 years, 20 years of doing things in a certain way, and you're trying to reverse some of these ill things that have been done by the PVP administration, it takes a while to chip away at that mountain that has been built up, that mountain of contempt, that mountain of abuse, that mountain of constitutional irregularities. And every day that we go to the National Assembly, we go with motions, you go with bills and so on, it is really chipping away at that mountain that's been built up over time that the Guyanese people have almost come to accept as normal.
Let me ask you this. Would constitutional reform solve some of these problems, or at least reduce some of these problems that we're having?
I can't say that right now, Malika, but I believe that even with the constitution that we have now, and in all its the little problems we have in it, that what I believe we need is regularity in government. We need to have accountability. People need to know how their monies are spent, and they need to know that the ministers who spend their money are accountable to them. And sometimes when you talk about constitutional reform and so on, to the ordinary man, he's saying, man, what are you talking about that? We need these people to spend their money to fix our roads. We need these people to spend their money to fix the lights. We need these people to spend their money to fix our health system, to fix our education system, to ensure that the children, when they go to school, they can pass examinations. So that there are more, in my view, fundamental things that need to be done, rather than just saying, okay, we need constitutional reform. We need it. I agree that we need some elements of constitutional reform. But to me, on the ground here, where it affects people most, we need some things that need to be done now.
Okay. Even before Chief Whip Ali jumps in on constitutional reform, because I noticed she made a note, and then of course I'm going to come to MP Bolton. MP Harman, is there a possible, because I know the viewers at home want to know, is there a chance, would there ever be a chance of Guyana seeing a government minister, whether it be the finance minister or any other minister who have misspent our monies? Is there a chance of us ever seeing them being put before the courts? How possible is that?
It's possible, Malika. Just believe. I think that the people of this country, that on the 28th of November 2011, they expressed a very clear position.
Yes.
They have seen what has happened since then. A number of them who did not feel part of the process and are now sitting back to say, oh boy, if I had only gone, it might have been even different. They are now seeing what has happened when you have a minority government. What we need is the majority government, and that is the government of the APNU. That is what we need. And once that is done, people who have become serial abusers of public funds will have to account for it.
That's right.
Okay, all right. MP Ali, you want to
Yes,
jump in?
I just wanted to add something to this bit of constitutional reform that came up a little while ago. This government will not acknowledge that there is need for constitutional reform because they will not support us having constitutional reform. Because to have constitutional reform, obviously you will have to have both sides coming together and acting on it. We have a constitutional reform commission, yes, but it will require 2/3 majority in Parliament, and the government likes it the way it is.
They're benefiting?
Yes, because I'll tell you what, the government was very critical of the 1980 Constitution, but what happened? They are so comfortable with it. There has been nothing advanced by them in order to change that Constitution. They're very happy with it. And so I do not believe in the present mode and mold that this government is in right now, that they will support any constitutional reform. They would want any constitutional reform in the first place.
Would an APNU government support it or even promote it?
Certainly.
Okay.
Certainly, because, I mean, if it requires better governance, then certainly we are going to be able to, we are going to support constitutional reform.
All right, okay. Viewers, I see the phone lines are going. I'm going to open up the phone lines a little later on, not now. Let's talk to MP Bolton here for a minute. Now, I know I'd like to talk to you about local government because I know not only the Guyanese public, but you have an interest in that, seeing those elections come off. Because we've been talking about local government elections for months on, since last year. How has the way that the PPPC has governed Guyana affected local government elections? And when I say affected it, meaning the fact that we've not been able to have it up to now. How has their governance affected that?
Malika, the PPPC administration have been creating and conjuring all sorts of reasons why local government elections have not been held in Guyana since they were last June in 1997. But the facts will show that it is the PPPC that has been in government since 1997 up until today. So the argument that they are seeking to make that someone else or something else is responsible for the non-holding of these elections does not hold water, because they are the ones who have had executive authority in Guyana. They actually had a majority in the 7th, 8th, and 9th Parliament, and this is the period when local government elections have not been held. So they have no leg to stand on insofar as they're seeking to evade or escape blame for the non-holding of these elections.
Has because we've seen a change basically. We had Mr. Ganga Prasad was the Minister of Local Government, and then even though I don't know that it was officially announced that, look, Mr. Whitaker is the new, not necessarily minister within the Ministry of Local Government, even though I don't think there was a big announcement, has the fact that Mr. Ganga Prasad is no longer the local government minister in any way affected us not having these elections?
Absolutely not, Malika. And if I may just elaborate a bit on the vein of your question, not only has there certainly has been no departure on the part of the PPP civic administration insofar as their responsibility to deliver on their obligations to have local government elections with the change in ministers. But what I have seen with the removal of Minister Ganga Prasad and his replacement, whether or not he has been officially appointed as a local government minister, to the best of my knowledge, that has not happened. But there actually has been a change in the attitude of the government, but sad to say, there's been a change for the worse. That Minister Whitaker is even more confrontational, if that were possible, than his predecessor. And Minister Whitaker has embarked on a course of antagonism and lack of respect for duly constituted councils or local democratic organs. I believe only in today's paper, Kaicho News perhaps, there's a photograph of Minister Whitaker and his entourage, and it comprises the permanent secretary of his ministry, the town clerk of the Georgetown Council, these, none of whom are, duly constituted members of the Georgetown City Council, and they are apparently overseeing and spearheading some cleanup campaign of the city of Georgetown, and in the process excluding the duly constituted and lawfully appointed council.
Do you believe that that's some form of governance that's designed to, I don't know, whether it be intimidate yourself, or Partnership for National Unity, or the public in general? Is it an intimidation tactic?
No, it is nothing of the sort, Malika. What it is, it's executive lawlessness, and it is continuation of a pattern of behavior that this minority administration has brought to bear ever since the commencement of the 10th Parliament. And the examples are numerous and they are legion. And if I have the opportunity, perhaps we can talk a little bit more about that.
Before I come back to MP Ali, if I'm to piggyback on a question that was raised earlier at a press conference that the APNU hosted, the president is still not assented to one of the bills. Your thoughts on that, and the fact that he seems to be, if berate is the correct word to use here, berating the all officials for saying that local government elections in Guyana are long overdue. Your thoughts on those two issues?
Malika, APNU has and will continue to call on the president to assent to the Local Government Amendment Act, which is one of the 4 pieces of legislation that was approved in the National Assembly that did not receive his assent. The reasons that were given, advanced by the president and have been subsequently repeated by Attorney General Nandalal, they're spurious, they lack foundation or basis, and we will continue to call on the president to give presidential assent to that bill. Even more egregious and reprehensible than the non-assent of the Local Government Act is the fact that the Local Government Commission Act, which came into being as a result of one of the new constitutional provisions that was enacted in 2001, constitutional reform, that the Local Government Commission Act, or the act that paves the way for the creation of a local government commission, actually received presidential assent, but for it to become operational, it requires a commencement order from Minister Whitaker. Sad to say, it was since August 7th of last year, 1 year is fast approaching since the Local Government Commission Act was passed in the National Assembly. And as of today, the minister stubbornly refused to issue that commencement order. Even as Minister Whitaker and his colleagues and cohorts within the PPP and the PPPC administration are professing their concern for local democracy and the need to have local government elections, but the facts will show that these policymakers and these officials are the impediment to us having local democracy.
I'm probably asking you to read minds here, but what would it take for the president to assent to the bill to see the need for local government elections in Guyana?
Malika, it will require the president to discharge his responsibility and to take his obligation seriously, which, you know, he took an oath of office. He swore to uphold the Constitution of Guyana and to, you know, to show true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of Guyana. The president, there are numerous examples that he has not discharged that responsibility. The current impasse that's likely to occur with the supplementary appropriations bill that was laid in the National Assembly at its last sitting, which has to do with Financial Paper 1, that will be debated at the next sitting of the National Assembly. It's one more example of a pattern of unlawful behavior on behalf of this administration. So what it requires is that the President and the PPPC administration uphold the Constitution of Guyana and the laws of Guyana. There's examples of serial abuse with regards to both.
All right. Thank you, MP Bulkan. As I stay on the note of the president, now, Chief Whip Ali, you're also in terms of mobilization and campaigning. Even though Mr. Winston Felix, viewers, for those who don't know, Mr. Winston Felix is the campaign director for local government elections for a Partnership for National Unity. But I know MP Ali also does a whole lot of work in terms of campaigning and preparations. Now, I am asking. If there were to be a snap election, whether it be snap, whether it be local government election, are you prepared? And the reason I'm asking you is because the president has been quoted in the media saying in a very carefree, some would call it a threatening manner, that look, if the opposition wants elections or they want a no confidence motion, to call no confidence motion, the government, bring it on, we're ready. Are you ready?
First, yes, Malika, let me say this, that whether it is local government elections, whether it's snap elections, whether it's general elections, I can tell you that APNU is ready. We have been out in the fields, we have been out in all the regions, and I can tell you that we have been doing a lot of work. We have been getting responses from the electorate, and I can tell you that we are ready for the elections. We are just waiting on the hour for the president to call it all. We have been along the highways, the byways, and the alleyways, and I can tell you that we have been very successful so far in our work. We are out again for the entire weekend. This afternoon we start again on the East Bank, and we're on the East Coast this weekend, and we're in Berbice also this weekend. We're in Region 3 this weekend. You know, we have a lot of people behind us, so we are ready.
Okay. I know you did state your position not only on this program but before on whether you would support the Alliance for Change in terms of a no confidence motion. But apart from whether APNU would want to support it or not, is it a recommended call at this point in time? Would it benefit us in any way if you were to join with the Alliance for Change and call a no confidence motion in the government?
Malika, I will not like to pronounce on whether, what's the word you use?
Whether it's recommended, if it's,
Yes. I would not like to pronounce on it because, like I said this morning at our press conference, that we have a cabinet, and our cabinet has to examine the issue. And we are going to make a determination after we would have examined the issue. But I must let the nation know that the amount of things that this present PPPC government is doing, it warrants a clean determination of no confidence in them. My colleagues earlier highlighted a few issues. In our press conference this morning, a few things were highlighted. The excess expenditure of the 4.5, in excess of 4.5 billion. The non-assent bills. Everything you do, the government runs to the court, to overturn it. We cannot operate in this manner. We cannot. You try to have a tripartite discussion. It is only the government just calls it because they want to add a number to the number of times they would have had tripartite meetings. Nothing comes out of it. There can be no compromise and these things. You find even the business community, which they speak of so gloriously by the Private Sector Commission, they are threatened, their businesses are threatened because they are not given opportunities to invest. Rather, the investors are imported. And so our local people who are working their butts out, they are not given the opportunity to make an investment and a contribution to this country. There is total disrespect also, Malika, for the rule of law. But you will recall it started with Mrs. Janet Jagan when she threw the court order over her shoulder. And so, we see all these things being, contributory factors of no confidence in this government. This government is lawless. This government is reckless. They must go. They must go. And the electorate will speak on this occasion. They have to go.
All right. Finally, before I have to go to the phone lines, viewers, you can prepare to call and pose your questions. MP Harman, of course, today's program is not designed to talk about blacklisting and the Financial Action Task Force. But let me ask you this. Is the problems that we seem to be having in terms of CFATF and this whole issue about being blacklisting, is that a reflection of the type of governance that we have, or is it a reflection of maybe what's happening in Parliament? I don't know if you would group this, if they're one and the same.
Well, I will just try to be very quick and brief about this, and to say that the road down which this government has chosen to take us, that blacklisting path, is a path which was not necessary. It is the government's responsibility to ensure that the legislation was passed, in addition to other measures which had been directed by the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force. It was their responsibility. But the president chose, rather than carrying out his constitutional mandate, a constitutional requirement that we have been asking him to do, he chose, and his government chose, to go down that road rather than doing what was right for the people of Guyana. The Constitution requires that there be a public procurement commission established. The president says, no, I'm not doing it. The Constitution has called for local government elections over these years. You have a bill, you have the law set to do it. The president says, no, I'm not doing it. Now, so when you put the consequences of blacklisting against the requirement for good governance, against that, and then you see, rather than doing what your constitution requires you to do, your government would say, look, let's go down this road, let me go and take blacklisting. So what I'm saying is that it was not an option really. This was something which the president was required to do by the Constitution. And he decided, you know what, I'm not doing it. I am not doing it. And furthermore, let me go down the blacklisting road. That is the choice which the government made. And this charade that they've gone on about, talking about Gail Teixeira going to Paris to talk to see if we can get off the blacklisting, that's not for sensible, right-thinking people. We are too understanding, we are too bright to be fooled by that type of nonsense. What is Gail Teixeira gone to Paris to do?
Holiday.
Is she a member of the CFATF? Is she President Obama that can go and make an appeal to the world? Is she an Angela Merkel that can make an appeal to the world? Is she a Vladimir Putin that can make an appeal to the world? She's not even the president of Guyana. So what is it? What message could she have taken to FATF?
Okay.
What I'm saying is that the PBP has been engaged for the longest while in creating conditions that they want to put to the people of Guyana that says that the APNU is responsible for this. And therefore, since they are responsible for all these bad things that are happening, let us go to an election, vote them out so we can get back the majority in the National Assembly. It's all about that. That is the PBB mindset. And they don't care what happened. You can left rubbish, you can left trash. At the end of the day, they feel that all they need to do is to get back the majority in the National Assembly. They don't care what happened to Guyana after that.
All right, let's go to the phone lines. Viewers, you know the rules. Turn the volumes of your television sets down. We're dealing with governance and constitutional issues today. But because I have shadow ministers for various ministries, that's of course public works, education, and local government, I'll tolerate some calls from those sectors, but nothing on health or crime. So please stick to our discussion and the ministries and the sectors that the members of the panel are representing. Caller, good day to you.
Good day, Malika.
Good day.
And the panel.
Yes.
Now, my question is to the opposition. I don't want to say the combined, but each opposition party.
Yeah.
Do we know the problem right now is the Constitution and the laws? When a stake all do you want. Now, my question or my suggestion to the opposition party, would they willing to make a manifesto saying that election is so clear concerning the Constitution, the changing of the Constitution, put it out there that we, the voters, will be able to scrutinize it and say, well, yes, this is what we need, this is how the country should be going, this is how it should be governed, and also the consequence of not adhering to the laws that they may be implemented or adhering to. If the consequence must be there. So when we going to decide, well, look, they say good, this is how our Constitution will be run. It's so favorable like America. It got a little of God inside. It got a little of the devil inside, but we must pick and choose. And we are the one must make the decision. So, well, look, when the time comes, this manifesto sung like, I don't know, this is what they got vision for the nation, and let we make our choices. Let them put up a thing now, and let me decide exactly what's going, because when they go in there, God they come, we want to know, would the Constitution laws remain the same like it is, like when Mr. Hyde, when they, Mr. Janet, when they, and it going on and on and all we come and do is talk about the Constitution and the laws and the abuse.
Okay.
So that is why we like to know, and we like some answer on that.
Thank you, caller. First caller, a perfect question.
All right. First of all, let me just say this, Malika. Thanks to the caller for making and observing those points. I would like to say that whenever we are approaching elections and whenever we're going into elections, we always put out a manifesto indicating what we are going to do and, you know, our policies and so on. And certainly, once election is going to come around, we are going to have a manifesto. Constitution, as I did say earlier, that we are open to revise our constitution. Maybe the caller or other people may be happy to make recommendations to us, And as anything else, we are open to recommendations and we will welcome them.
Okay, great.
So let me add, if I may
Sure,
add,
sure,
please,
before we go to
Malika,
the call.
that an essential plank of our last manifesto was constitutional reform.
Yeah.
We made that an essential element of our manifesto once the APNU got into government. And I believe that whichever other elections come, because it is such a requirement in this country that I rather suspect that once we go into another election, that constitutional reform will maintain its pride of place.
Yes.
Okay.
We believe that even in the current constitution, Article 13 speaks about inclusionary democracy, and that we have actually committed ourselves to the principles of inclusionary democracy. At the last elections, we actually said publicly that were we to win the elections, that we will embrace not just the political parties, but the best that Guyana has to offer to ensure that we have a good government that can actually take this country forward.
Okay.
So, insofar as constitutional reform, that is what I would wish to say.
MP Pulkan, you wanted to make a comment?
Yes, please, Malika. I'd like to join my colleagues in thanking the caller for what is a very relevant and pertinent question.
Yeah.
That is the need that is felt by many out there for constitutional reform. But there are two aspects, if you will. One is whatever might be the real or imagined deficiencies in the existing constitution. And there are many aspects of the constitution that many persons feel need revisiting. But the caller had started out, I believe, by saying that we have a problem with the existing constitution and laws. It is not entirely so, because the situation that has transpired in this 10th Parliament is that we have a minority administration that is not adhering to existing laws and existing provisions of the Constitution. So, I don't, and that is separate and apart from the fact that we need to have a look again at our Constitution. And let me give an example. The most important bill that an executive or an administration brings to the National Assembly in any given year is the budget. And this is why, following the elections of November 2011, the leader of the opposition made a public call to the president for the establishment of a tripartite budget committee to be located within the National Assembly. Because given the fact that the executive was a minority one, and it would need support, or it will need the blessings of the majority in the National Assembly to pass the most important bill that will be laid annually. But that call was rejected by the executive, and the three budgets that they have brought to date, 2012, 2013, and 2014, were budgets that that did not benefit from participation or the involvement or meaningful engagement of the National Assembly. So we have a situation where the executive has shown disrespect and disregard for the role of the National Assembly.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have to begin to wrap up our program. In essence, just to bring the conversation back to where we began, it basically, as I asked for wrap-up sentiments from each of you, of course, beginning with MP Pulkan. MP Pulkan, as we begin to wrap up, what is needed for there to be good governance in Guyana at this point in time, just in about a minute or so?
Yes, thank you, Malika. Malika, what is needed is for the administration to respect the will and decision of the people. The people of Guyana made a decision in November of 2011 at the time of the general elections. The decision that the people made was that winner must not take all. By their actions and their vote, they issued a call for shared governance because they gave one party, namely the PPP, the executive, but they did not give that party control of the legislature. And these are two important branches of the government. So implicit in that call was the need for accommodation and mutual respect. However, sad to say that 3 years on now, the PPP have rejected the message of the people. They have decided that they will continue in their own, in their old ways, which was that winner will take all, that we are not interested in this question of shared governance, which you, the electorate, have determined. It is regrettable and it is reprehensible by their actions throughout the life of the 10th Parliament. This is the approach that this minority administration has brought. In the process, they have rejected, as I've said, the will of the people. They have shown disrespect for the authority and autonomy of the National Assembly. And I have no doubt that having rejected this new dispensation that the electorate has sought to bring into being, that they will be punished and punished condignly by the electorate when the opportunity next presents itself.
Okay, all right. MP Ali.
Thank you, Malika. Malika, in my wrap-up sentiments, I would like to say that it is regrettable that this government employs recklessness in governance of this beautiful country of ours. And I would like to call on the government to recognize, and not to put a blind eye to the type of government that we have. We have a minority government, and this government must come to realization that it is a minority government. Over the past 10 years, they would have experienced many, many things. And so that is the first thing I would like them to recognize, that it is a different dispensation, it is a minority government, and they must respect the combined opposition. It was not us in the Parliament, the APNU and AFC who said so, but the people out there said so, that they must respect us. We have got to work together. We must not engage in discussions for the sake of engaging. We must let the talks work. We must not be able, the government must stop bulldozing efforts of the combined opposition. We have a role to play. And so I call on the government to subscribe to good governance.
Thank you very much. Thank you. MP Harman.
Well, I endorse the final wrap-up sentiments of my two colleagues. I think they've actually put it succinctly, and I don't know how much I can add to that, but just to say that I think that the government is in a mode, in a sort of operations mode, which says that we will do the things the way we want to do it. It's a very dangerous mode for them to get into, but as old people say, when it is hard, you can feel.
Thank you very much. Well said, sir. This has been another edition of Facing the Nation. Of course, my guests were APNU Chief Whip, Shadow Minister of Education, Assistant General Secretary of the People's National Congress Reform, Ms. Amna Ali, and of course, APNU Member of Parliament and Shadow Minister of Local Government, Mr. Ronald Bulkin, and APNU Member of Parliament, Shadow Minister of Public Works and Attorney at Law, Mr. Joseph Harman. I am Malika Ramsey, reminding you to be good Guyanese citizens. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and of course, join me again next time. Goodbye.